What's going on YouTube? It's Teej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my guys for the 2023 NFL Draft. Hope you guys are excited. Be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video, and subscribe if you're new to the channel, want to see more draft coverage, want to join us for night 1 and day 2 of the NFL Draft, where we will be live, or if you're just looking for more football coverage in your life in general. And of course, leave me your favorite prospects for this year's class. My guys is as subjective as it gets because it's just that. These are my guys. People I feel like I'm higher on than consensus, so let me hear some of your favorite draft prospects and maybe who you think deserve a little bit more love than what they're garnering right now. We're going to go position by position. We're going to start with the quarterbacks, but before we get started, also be sure to check out the links in the description to BetUS. They are the sponsor for today's video. You can get up to 125% back on your first deposit, up to $2,500. So it's a great return on your investment there to join into the sports gambling world. But also, the second link will give you $50 off on your first bet just if you sign up. So check out those links down below if you're looking for a new sports book to use. BetUS has got you covered. So let's start with quarterbacks, and I'll go top to bottom here. I'm going to alternate back and forth on that. Actually, it's easiest if we start at the bottom. Bryce Young, and again, these are not my quarterback rankings. Bryce Young is my QB1, and that's why he's on this list, because I feel like, the debate's been who should be QB1, him or Stroud, and then some people have AR as one, and that's fine. But it's been Bryce Young for me pretty much since college football season started. My way too early quarterback rankings, I had Stroud at 1, but yeah, once we got underway, and also Stroud had some bumps in the roads early on, especially that Notre Dame game, and I don't think he's the reason they lost the Michigan game by any stretch, but that's another one people will hold against him. But focusing on that Notre Dame game, that's when I was like, yeah, Bryce Young just doesn't have games like that, and he's got such a great feel for the pocket, and he has every skill set necessary for someone to not get murdered at 5'10", 185 pounds. And that's why I'm not really worried about it at the NFL level. Then Tanner McKee at 2. And again, this is not my number 2 quarterback. He's number 5. I have him ahead of Hendon Hooker. And that's where I think the hot take comes in. I just think Hooker benefits from that Josh Heupel offense. And then Tanner McKee kind of was left out to dry with a bad wide receiver core. Michael Wilson only played 26 games over 5 years. A bad offensive line, and a head coach that was kind of soon out the door. And David Shaw at Stanford. So I think he just had a rocky environment all around him. I think the throwing motion's a little long, but prototypical size, has a good arm, very accurate, can make a lot of those, tight window throws. And I think put him at the NFL level. I'm not saying he'll be elite by any stretch, but I think he'll look a lot better than he did this last year at Stanford, and then can be a competent spot starter and maybe even someone who becomes a top 32 starter. Don't want to rule that out either. And then Will Levis. This is my QB2. So I'm higher on him than most for sure. I just love the traits that are there and how they could translate to the NFL level. And I also think, like McKee, coming from an absolutely abysmal environment around him. I mean, it's sometimes hard to finish watching tape from games because it's like, dude, he's getting no help from the play design, the play calling in general, the wide receivers, the offensive line. Like Chris Rodriguez is the only other guy on that side of the ball I think deserves to play on Sundays. And he's kind of this ground and pound, running back. We're actually going to talk about Chris Rodriguez on the next screen. So, yeah, I just think you get him in the NFL lineup and just put competent talent around him, he's going to automatically look better. And I think part of the reason decision-making is always something people point out is because he's playing hero ball. And I take it to, Jameer Gibbs, who we're going to talk about on the next screen as well, where at Georgia Tech, he was trying to win games by himself. And that felt like Will Levis this year. And also, I'd make my last argument here. If you were to just flip 2022 and 2021 tape, people would say, oh, let's just say 2022 becomes 2021. They'd be like, okay, well, he's got the tools, but he's, bad decision maker. The footwork's kind of all over the place. And then if the 2021 tape followed it, you'd be like, okay, well, now he's making strides in the right direction. They're creating some big plays. He's got some additional weapons around him, and we're seeing it fully come together. Okay, this guy should go top 5. I think all that happens if you just switch 2021 and 2022 seasons in their production. I don't think he got worse. I think the situation around him got worse, and there's only so much you could do backpacking one of the worst rosters in the SEC against the best conference in college football. So let's go ahead and move on to running backs now. Chris Rodriguez, number 3. Again, not my top 3 running backs, but he wasn't my honorable mentions. Good power back, and he kind of feels like poor man's Blake Corum. And especially with Blake Corum not coming out in this year's draft, I want to give him a shout here because he is going to pick up 8 to 15 yards. Like, I don't think Chris Rodriguez is breaking off any 75-yarders, but 8 to 15 yards at a time. Plays with good power, solid vision, can work between the tackles, some solid pass-catching upside as well. Not the most, again, elusive, twitched-up athlete by any stretch, but I think with his vision and the power that he plays with, he's just going to pick up chunks at a time, 5 to 8 yards, then 8 to 15. And again, with the receiving ability on top of that, I think he's a sneaky day 3 guy that not going to lead a committee, but teams are going to be like, oh, wow, man, Chris Rodriguez is our number 2 back? Damn, he's better than I thought he would be for a 5th-round pick. I could totally see that narrative playing out with Chris Rodriguez. Tank Bigsby at number 2. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people have cooled on him, and I get it. Like, Dwayne McBride could have easily put him on here. He's getting a lot of hype right now, and his tape is crazy. He just comes from a small school. Roshan Johnson, Tajay Spears, some of these other names that have picked up steam since the end of the regular season. But I feel like Tank Bigsby, because that's been kind of forgotten about. A lot of the Auburn guys, I feel like their tape's not as great. And I love betting on guys who are coming from problem programs. And, with Brian Hersley as the head coach at Auburn, I would say that was a problematic, time to be a player at Auburn. So I think there's some upside just getting him out of that messy situation. Guy who has an abundance of speed and power. And you go back 2 years ago, kind of felt like he was tripping over himself, but not really an issue this past season. And I think he's got some decent elusiveness too. I think he's got some jump cut in his game. Working mostly north to south with his speed and power, a big strength. But I also think that he can steer his body and also has a little bit of shiftiness working laterally. So this is a good running back class. And there are a lot of guys to talk about. That's why in my last mock, I was even talking about, let's talk about Izzy Abanikanda here, just because there's so many names to throw out. I don't want to forget about anybody in those mock draft videos. They are typically the videos that get the most views on my channel. So I'm trying to, share out different, running back options and different skill sets and talk about each and every prospect to the best that I can. Tank Bigsby is still one of the 4 best running backs in this class, in my opinion. And just because, maybe he didn't have the most insane follow-up to his true freshman season at Auburn doesn't mean he's not a good player. And then Jahmyr Gibbs. And the reason he's my number 1 guy is because I think Bijan is in tier 1, and I almost want to just put Jahmyr Gibbs in tier 1B because he's not the same tier of player as Bijan, but it's not far off. And I think he brings as much receiving ability, maybe just a half step below Bijan Robinson, while also running 4.36. And we got to see the vision this last year at Alabama. Again, he was at Georgia Tech, and he was trying to win games. He was trying to break off 80-yard carries every time he touched the ball. And then he got to Alabama. He was like, this offensive line will just create open holes. I'm good. Sweet. And we got to see him play with some more patience. We got to see him trust his vision. And then he gets into a hole, and it's like one-on-one. He can beat you with the long speed, or he can break your ankles. And also 5'9", 200 pounds. Like, he is not small. Like, people will say, 5'9", he's little. Like, no. He's short, but he's well-built, and he's stocky. And he's got a little bit of strength. It's not what he's winning with, but it's not like this guy's going to take a hit and immediately, just collapse and get hurt and, get knocked off the route. He's got some contact balance within his game because of being 200 pounds. And 5'9", 200 pounds, kind of the perfect build for running backs. And again, the receiving upside is undeniable. But part of the reason he's my number 1 guy is he was my preseason number 2 running back, and I felt like that was early love for him, and people started to catch up, and because of that, he's kind of maintained that number 2 running back status for me. And I put Bijan in tier 1A and Gibbs in 1B, and then you get to Zach Charbonnet, Tank Bigsby, and Sean Tucker, who I think populate those lower tiers. Then for the wide receivers, Quentin Johnston, he comes in at 3. That's supposed to say 3. Apologies for my error. I'm just stupid, but He comes in at 3 because he's been wide receiver 1 for me pretty much this whole cycle. Way too early rankings, I had JSN, but then the injury kind of gave me some pause. And Quentin Johnston overtook that spot. I think there's a lot of potential, and I think with that speed, the yards after the catch ability, plus what he can do over the top, he can win at 2 different areas of the field. He's not just John Ross, where he has to get open down the field. That yak game, I think, is a big component of what he could bring to the NFL level. And then Michael Wilson is my number 2. I watched the Senior Bowl, I was like, oh my God, this guy should be going somewhere top 50, top 60. And people have been saying the same thing, but I still feel like he's kind of underappreciated by maybe the masses. I think some people who get in the weeds of it and really follow it, like Michael Wilson, but then maybe just your general casual draft fans, which is fine to be, or like Michael Wilson, Stanford. Stanford offense good? I don't know. Part of the reason they weren't good because he didn't play enough games. So that's the big cause for or reason for pause here with Wilson is how many games he's going to play. But I say this all the time. Like, every one of these players is a hit away from not being the same dude or never playing again. So I think Michael Wilson's worth a shot. He has an awesome release. There are a few receivers that play with their 6'1" plus size, and Wilson at 6'2", 215, 100% plays with that size. Sure hands, can work the middle of the field. I think he's your prototypical X wide receiver. I also think he plays faster than 4.58. So big on Michael Wilson. And then Marvin Mims comes in at number 1. So again, Quentin Johnston's my wide receiver 1, but I just feel like Marvin Mims is the most underrated wide receiver. He's in my top 10, inside-out versatility, 4.38 speed, was leaned on as the go-to wide receiver during his time at Oklahoma. Can be a big play threat, can work underneath, can be a yards after the catch guy. And yeah, he's small for sure. He's 5'10", mid 180-pound range. I also think he can do stuff over the middle of the field, partially just because he's a good route runner. So I think he can be an impact player at all 3 levels, but namely what he does yards after the catch and just, throwing him a drag and letting his speed play, and then also what he does deep down the field, and he's kind of a big play waiting to happen. So I'm a big Marvin Mims guy, and I feel like he's been kind of lost in the shuffle in this year's wide receiver class. Let me get to the tight ends. Luke Musgrave, I also totally believe in the potential. Didn't have the unbelievable all-time type of combine some people thought he might have, but I think that's fine, man. I think, with the frame, 6'6", 250, the athletic traits that he still has, it's not that they're great, but they're still really good. It's not too far off what people were thinking. And I think he's a good route runner with soft hands, and I think there's upside for him as a blocker. He's got the frame, and I think he's got the effort to do it. So this is a great tight end class, and I think, with him missing some time this year and not having as insane of a combine as some others, he's been pushed down some people's rankings. And then Zach Kuntz here, too. I felt like I talked about him kind of relatively early on in this process. Twitch-up athlete and a former Penn State tight end. Anytime I see a tight end, even if they left Penn State, but the fact that Penn State wanted him, I'm like, you got my interest. I mean, Gesicki, Freiermuth, and then Brenton Strange this year. They got a pipeline for these tight ends. And I love Freiermuth. I love Gesicki. So I'm a little biased to them. So then you look at Zach Kuntz, and it's like, well, why did he have to leave Penn State? Oh, well, because Pat Freiermuth, future second-round pick, is there. Brenton Strange, hot name right now that didn't have production, but still a good football player, and I think can play the position at a high level and could easily be a top 100 pick. So then Zach Kuntz goes to ODU, and year over year has been kind of bulking up and adding weight, and I think he's kind of just now getting to that point where it's like, okay, now he's got the mass. Still think he can add 5, 10, maybe 15 pounds, but now we're at the point where it's like, okay, now he has the body of an NFL caliber tight end, has an electric 40 time, high-end athletic traits, without a doubt, and that's the calling card because he gets hurt this last year at ODU. And it felt like he had everything he needed to just light it up, especially at a small school. Like, he should have had insane numbers. But because of the injury, it's a little bit of a question mark of what that athleticism looks like and does it play that way on the field. Got out to a good start before the injury, but it's such a small sample size, no way to know if it's really there. But I think as a day 3 pick, or even late day 2, if we're getting to the late 90s and into the 100s, I'm thinking about it. Honestly, if Kansas City sticks and picks at 95, Zach Kuntz is not a bad flyer option to be that number 2 tight end, and we'll see what he develops into behind Travis Kelce. And then Michael Mayer, he's been my number 1 tight end this whole entire process. And I know Dalton Kincaid is, he's got the highest ceiling from a receiving standpoint, but Michael Mayer to me is kind of that mix of worlds between Kincaid and Darnell Washington. May not be the best blocker on the move like a Washington kind of projects to be, but I think he's really good in the phone booth and maybe can go toe-to-toe with Washington in that respect. May not be the most insane athlete, so he doesn't have the upside that Kincaid has, but I don't think 4.7 is terrible. Again, we got to find this middle ground between being a great athlete and a bad athlete. It's called being an average athlete, and that's where Michael Mayer falls in. And I think when you watch him as a yards after the catch guy, there is more reason to believe that he will get better as a route runner and a separator. And I think technically speaking, he runs good routes and he's relatively sharp out of the breaks. He just always plays through contact, and he might be the best contested catch guy in this class, so it kind of worked out for him. But I think at the next level, especially when you see his yak ability, there's reason to think that little bit more wiggle comes into play, and he becomes a little bit more of a true separator. I think he knows how to run routes, and I think he can be a good route runner, and I think he is. He just needs to find that separation a little bit more, and some of it's kind of the head fakes and setting up DBs and linebackers that way. But nevertheless, also really good hands, like I mentioned, great contested catch weapon. I'd argue the best contested catch pass catcher in this class, wide receiver, tight end, doesn't matter. And I think 4.7 40 is being a little overblown. It's not that he's a bad athlete; he's just average. We need to understand, average plays when you have everything else set and ready, and you're technically polished, you have good hands, all that sort of stuff. Then we're on to the offensive tackles. Darnell Wright at 3. I wanted to put him on here because he's my OT5 and has been for a while now. But I wanted to put him in over DeJuan Jones, and I just wanted to talk about him because I think his movement skills have been a little underrated throughout this process, and I've talked about this in a couple of videos recently, so apologies if you're hearing this again. Go ahead and skip forward because I'm having the same rehash debate of him versus DeJuan Jones, why I have Wright at 5 and Jones at 6. Jones has got those freaky arms and really, really strong, but Darnell Wright, I think, is as strong. Might have the best anchor in this class. I mean, he sat and, took pressure against Will Anderson and more than held his own. And the bull rush from, to me, edge 1 in this class, which speaks volumes. And then underrated athleticism. I think this guy, if he got drafted into a gap or zone scheme, rather, I think he'd be fine. He's not out of this world. I think Paris Johnson's probably a better fit for it. I even think Broderick Jones could be a better fit. Peter Skoronski, if you think he's a tackle. Best blocking offensive lineman on the move in this year's class. They all probably fit a little better, but I don't think Darnell Wright can't fit. So if the Jets were like, hey, all these other tackles are gone, I'm taking Darnell Wright at 13. I don't think he sticks out. I don't think he's out of the question. Can't take him here and can't fit. Like Dwan Jones, they play zone schemes at Ohio State, but yeah, maybe if Dwan Jones loses 15, 20 pounds, maybe then, but that'll shore up his balance for sure too. But I think Wright has more in the movement department, so that's why I want to have him here at 3. Paris Johnson Jr. has been my OT1 pretty much this whole cycle, so I want to put him in here. I love Paris Johnson Jr., the athleticism, the reach, the 6'6", 315 frame, and then the ability to go from right guard to play left tackle and not miss a beat. And he's also been pass pro this year. Sure, you can probably clean up his hands placement a little bit, but first-year starter at left tackle, I don't think it's life-changing. I think it's correctable as well. So yeah, big fan of Paris Johnson Jr., so he comes in as number 2 on my guys because I feel like, a lot of people are coming around to him being OT1, but I felt like I was maybe a little ahead of the curve there. And then Anton Harrison, he's a top 3 offensive tackle in this year's class for me, but I would prioritize if I'm making a draft, if I'm drafting a tackle in the first round, I want pass protection. That would be my focus. So that's my bias there. But Anton Harrison and a group of tackles that has good athleticism, I feel like Anton Harrison's been a little overlooked there. And I already think he made strides in the right direction, playing with more strength this year. I think get him to the NFL level, get him on that NFL nutrient, dietary plan and whatnot, and then that NFL workout program, he'll get even stronger and he'll play with it even more. But he's so fluid in pass protection. And I think his athleticism lets him get to the second level. Like, I don't think he's abysmal in the run game by any stretch, but 3-year starter at Oklahoma, and he's just as smooth as it gets in pass protection and might be right up there with Paris Johnson Jr., maybe even surpassing Paris Johnson Jr. in some people's eyes as the best pure pass protector in this year's class. On to the interior offensive line. I'll go Cyrus Torrence. Same sort of stuff where I had him, as my IOL 1, not including Peter Skoronski in that mix. Pretty much this whole cycle. Really was impressed with his translation from Louisiana Lafayette to Florida. And he really held up as a pass protector. No penalties, no sacks allowed this year with Florida. And sometimes those don't tell a full story, but even when you watch the tape, he's going toe-to-toe with Jalen Carter and plenty of other nose tackles and D tackles in the SEC. And that jump from Louisiana Lafayette to Florida cannot be understated with how much that means to me. That's why, I was hyped on Jared Verse. I love and I like Dion Henley. I like these guys who can go from one school to the next, learn a new playbook, and especially when there's a leap in competition, that they can handle it, because that makes me feel comfortable with them doing the same thing with the NFL level. So, like Osiris Torrance, also, I feel like I'm higher on his movement skills than a lot of people. Then Andrew Voorhees, a name that, he tore his ACL at the Combine, but, there have been reports that his timeline could be him coming back as soon as this fall. So maybe he misses the first handful of games, maybe this is the first half of the season. But even if he comes back December, January, something like that, depending on who he gets drafted by, he could be playing some very meaningful football this year. And 5-year player in college, multi-year starter with USC, and he was awesome. He was better probably 2 years ago than he was this last year at USC, but nonetheless has put together great tape with the Trojans, and I think is NFL ready. Older guys, maybe that holds him back, but again, I think that also plays into him being NFL ready. So the Rams at some point in the 3rd round, I think they're getting great value. Maybe he sneaks in late round 2. Maybe the Broncos want to take a shot on him at 67 or 68. I just think he's been kind of lost and forgotten about because of the injury, but he's still such a damn good football player, and I think he makes an impact right away. And then Steve Avila, I feel like I'm a little higher on him than a lot of people, and I love his pass protection. I think he's the best pass protecting interior offensive lineman, guard, center, you name it. I think he's the best of the bunch there, outside of Skoronski, if you're going to call Skoronski a guard. But also great frame, has the size, has the strength. Probably not a zone scheme fit, but I think with gap or man, however you want to phrase it, he's a great fit. It also comes with guard center flexibility. And who knows, he might be even better center than he is a guard. But I think in a gap scheme, you play him at guard and you take advantage of his pass protection upside there. So yeah, big time fan of Steve Avila. Then he gets to the interior defensive line. Moro Ojomo, 6'3", 290. I think you're just getting a high level run defender right away, but also a guy with a pass rush win rate at almost 18%. Plays with good juice, high-end athleticism. I know Big 12 defenders are a little make you hold your breath when you make that pick. But I think Ojomo can be different here. And he's got years of production. So, I think with his knack for being able to stop the run, plus his athleticism gives him some upside as a pass rusher. Plus, we've already seen it. And him do it at a high level at Texas. So I think someone's getting a steal there on day 2. And who knows, maybe even early day 3. I'm not hearing a whole lot of hype about Moro Ojomo, and I'm a little befuddled why. Then Brian Brzee at 2. Again, a guy I've been pretty high on throughout this entire process. I felt like I was one of the last people to have him in the top 10, and then he's still somewhere in the teens to 20s for me. A lot of times I'm doing mock drafts based off of what I'm hearing and kind of where the buzz is at, while also exploring team fits and player landing spots. But Brzee, I think, is still one of the best interior defensive line players in this class. Missed so much time because of injuries and then the family tragedy this last year. I feel like he had part of his development time kind of cut short. And also, like I mentioned this in my mock, and I had a bunch of people loving this, but I don't really mean this as a ton of flack against Clemson, but KJ Henry feels like he didn't get better year over year. Miles Murphy never felt like he fully developed as a pass rusher. And then same thing with Brian Brzee. So maybe it's just the way they're coaching these guys, and maybe it's just in the way they're running their defense. I mean, who knows? Thousands of different variables could come into play of this. But I felt like all these guys had all this potential. It never really took a great step forward. So maybe Brian Brzee has that unlocked the next level. And I mean, his size and athleticism, there are few people who play and move the way he does given his size. And I think there's a whole lot of upside here. I mean, hey, number 1 overall recruit for a reason coming out of high school. And then Keanu Benton, I've said this a lot of times, what people want Mazi Smith to be and think that he could be is what Keanu Benton is now. High-level run defender, plays with good strength, stops the runs, really football smart, and then has more better with his hands, people want to say, and then he's got more juice off the line of scrimmage. He plays quicker than what people want to just assume he does because he's a D tackle from Wisconsin. But yeah, go throw in the tape. I mean, this guy is as underrated, I think, as it gets in this year's class. And I think he makes an impact right away. Where I could see where Mazi Smith, maybe he saw it against the run to start, but it's like, wow, where's that pass rush upside? Meanwhile, Keanu Benton is the guy, because he's polished as a pass rusher and he knows how to use his hands and he's already kind of figured it out at the college level, that you see his impact more so right away than someone like Mazi Smith. But I'm definitely in the minority of that opinion. Let me get to the edges. BJ Ojulari, like him a ton. I always feel bad because I have him fall so much in my mocks. It's just because he's a little light and not the strongest guy, but nothing against the player, because I think you get the draft dude who knows how to be a pass rusher, has a full move set, knows how to play, put together a pass rush plan against a tackle. Like, he knows how to play that game of chess with an O-lineman. Inside counter, I'm glad he was able to develop that this past year at LSU because he already has the speed and the finesse to win on the outside shoulder. So, yeah, I think you're getting an NFL-ready pass rusher. And if he goes to a team like Kansas City or, New Orleans maybe, where they already have some bigger body edges that can play on rundowns, and BJ Ojulari can focus on solely being a pass rusher, that's when he's going to become the most impactful player his rookie year. Then Will McDonald. I've always liked Will McDonald, and also, I don't want to hear because no one's talking about his arm length, 90th percentile. I'll keep saying it so people have it drowned or drilled into their head. But yeah, Will McDonald also played out of position. I wonder what his upside might be as a run defender. Not saying he's going to be like all pro run defender, but moving him from inside the tackle shoulder to outside, I mean, I would only think that move helps him in the run defense game, at least just setting the edge, right? And with those arms, I mean, that's what we're talking about Tyree Wilson being able to do. So can this guy set the edge? I certainly think he can once he's playing outside of tackle shoulders. And then, of course, you get the burst off the line of scrimmage, the bend that goes with it, and the long arms to be able to long arm tackles. So, yeah, I think an absolute steal, late first round to early second round, a productive player pretty much right away. And then Nolan Smith at 1. I mean, he's just been my guy because I love the character, I love the attitude, and I love the fact he's a team captain on one of the best defenses of all time in 2022, and contributor the best college defense of all time in 2021. Yes, he's a little light, but he stops the run already at a high level, and I think he can add 5-10 pounds worth of muscle and still keep his high-end athleticism. Needs probably a little bit of refinement in regards to being a more polished pass rusher, but I haven't seen anything that would say Nolan Smith's not going to put in the work to grow in that area. So yeah, big time fan of Nolan Smith. Linebackers, number 1 was the easiest I'll get out here. 3, Trenton Simpson's still my number 1 off-ball linebacker, and I feel like a lot of people have kind of wavered from that. So I had to put him on here because I'm still relatively high on him, and similar measurables, actually higher end athletic traits than Fred Warner. And I'm not saying he's going to be Fred Warner, but, put him in the right defense, he could have that type of role and that type of impact and become a pretty quick starter for whoever does draft him. And then Jack Campbell, he's my number 2 off-ball linebacker, so I actually have them upside down here. But, so many people soured on Campbell midway through the season, and we're kind of just low on him and waiting to see what his athleticism was. And then, 64th percentile 40, 95th percentile 3 cone. It's like, yep, you're checking boxes for me. This guy has enough athleticism to be the first linebacker off the board. And honestly, if you ask me right here, right now, go place a bet on BetUS, I think he's the first linebacker off the board. So, yeah, I had to put him in at number 2. I kind of stuck with him throughout the year, and his athleticism showed me enough that, yeah, this guy can be a first rounder, and he can be a starter right away, and he's not going to be a liability in coverage, which, a lot of people were concerned about midway through the season, really pretty much leading up to the combine. And then DeMarvion Overshown has been my guy. Safety turned linebacker, preseason linebacker number 5 for me. Currently my number 5 off-ball linebacker. Love his feel for zone coverage. And then he cleaned up his missed tackle percentage a ton this year. Only had like 5 missed tackles this season, which was a huge step in the right direction, which signals to me this guy has the work ethic. He's already put in what is the labor necessary to grow and get better. He needs to get better filling run lanes and kind of learning the ins and outs of the position. But nevertheless, that type of coverage upside with a safety turn linebacker who's 6'3", 230 pounds. He's not necessarily super light like a Dorian Williams or someone else like that in this class. So I think he can stick on early downs. And with him cleaning up his tackling, I don't think he's going to be a liability. I think he can stick and get into a rotation to see the field relatively early on. He's probably a day 2 to day 3 guy, so I don't think he's going to be a starter right away, but I think he can play some meaningful football, get on the field, split some snaps with whoever else you have in the team, and it could also be an awesome special teamer. Then we get to corners, 2 more positions to go over. Garrett Williams, feel like he's been kind of forgotten about in this cornerback class that is super, super deep, but because of the injury against Notre Dame, we didn't get to see where his season was going to go trajectory-wise, but man coverage traits and size and athleticism while playing in a zone-heavy defense, that's such an interesting combination. And I think he's got better footwork than someone like an Effectu Melifonwu, who came out of Syracuse a couple years ago, and I also liked his upside. But I think Williams, because of his feet, has a higher floor than Effectu Melifonwu, while also having a sizable upside, just because so many people were expecting a breakout this last year, didn't see it in the first half of the season, then he gets hurt against Notre Dame. So who knows what could have been on the other side of that hill. So I think you could be getting a guy who makes an impact pretty much right away. Number 2, Darius Rush. Yeah, I mean, he's another one of those guys that's kind of forgotten about. Like, I know Cam Smith's good, but Darius Rush, I mean, I don't know if there's a whole lot separating those two. Longer arms, more ball production, the faster 40. If you're someone who's looking at athletic traits and ball production, I think there's an argument to be made that Darius Rush is the better of those 2 guys. And he's also great at the Senior Bowl. Had a couple reps where it's like, well, okay, not ideal. But for the most part, like, majority of his Senior Bowl was really, really impressive. So he even proved that, hey, step up the competition. I can do it outside of South Carolina. I can learn a new playbook. I can play with different guys and still play at a high level. So, yeah, I'm big on Darius Rush. And it feels like he's a 3rd-round guy, but if he snuck into the 2nd round, I still wouldn't be mad about it. And then Julius Brents, if you've been around the channel, this was no surprise. Like, after the Combine, I was pounding the table saying this guy's the biggest winner. And you can make an argument that, no, it was Nolan Smith. No, it was Aditamiwa Adibare. No, it was DJ Turner. Whoever. But Brents, I was like, dude, 6'3". Him and Joey Porter Jr. are 100th percentile arm length at 34 inches. Oh, and his 3 cone is 6'3". That type of change of direction skills, put him in cover 3 defense and just let him make plays. Oh, and 4.51 40, that's plenty fast enough. He's played at 2 different schools, learning 2 different playbooks. K-State runs a little bit more man than Iowa, and he played more at K-State, so it was good to see him, back half his career, be able to get more onto the field than what he was at Iowa. So, yeah, I am all in on Julius Brent. I think he should go late 1, but ultimately I think he goes somewhere round 2, and someone's going to get an absolute steal. And then safeties to round us out, Jammie Robinson. Yeah, the athletic numbers kind of worry me, both at the Combine and the Pro Day, so a little iffy on that. But a guy who played almost an equal amount of snaps at strong, free, and nickel. And if you know me, I love DBs. You can move all over the field. That is my crutch, no doubt about it. And I want DBs that I can move any which way and play them all over the place and just cause some headaches for an opposing offense, but also played at a high level, 4 years worth of college experience. So maybe where the athleticism isn't there, his football smarts kind of makes up for it. And then Antonio Johnson and Brian Branch, these were my number 1 and 2 safeties, so I'll kind of hit them, with one another at the same time. Antonio Johnson also feels like a guy that lost draft stock and momentum for next to no reason. I wish there was more playmaking ability in this game, but at the worst, he's a 6'2" nickel corner, strong safety hybrid, 200 pounds, great inside the box, very assured tackler, can fly to the ball carrier. Even if he doesn't create turnovers, he does everything else you would need out of that, nickel, strong safety-ish hybrid. So I don't know where his draft stock is plummeting, and I don't know why it took such a nosedive, but I still think, late round 1 doesn't feel plausible, but I wouldn't hate that pick. But somewhere round 2, someone's going to get a really good player, and maybe it's Philadelphia using him as a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement. Maybe it's the Cardinals using him as a Budda Baker replacement. I don't know, but I think someone's going to get a really, really good player right away. And then Brian Branch, yeah, I love this kid. Great tackler, great man coverage. I think he can play all 5 positions in the secondary. 4.51 speed, you might not want him on the outside. But if you're playing off zone coverage, like if you're playing quarters, I think he could do it. But focusing on him in either safety spot or in the nickel, I think this guy is going to be a playmaker. And 4.51 speed, getting back to that, I think he plays faster than that. I wish I had the NGS data because I feel like he definitely moves quicker than that, both with speed and just his quicks. But I think part of that is also like, feels like a guy with a high football IQ. Wish I could talk to him and interview him and get him on a board and kind of talk some ball with him. But because of that, he just looks like he's processing and understanding a play before it's even fully developed. When you watch him in Alabama, and he's just reacting to plays faster than everyone else. So whether it's football smarts or it's just quick twitch, whatever it is, the results speak. And I think he's one of the most NFL-ready players in this class. And I'd be willing to take bets with people that he's the best defensive rookie out of this year's class after year 1. But we'll have to wait and see, obviously. Let me see the landing spot first before I make that bet. But guys, that is going to do it for the My Guys of the 2023 NFL Draft. Gave you each and every position group I did a position ranking for. So now let me hear your guys down below in the comments section. Who do you think is getting overlooked, whether it's a quarterback, wide receiver, corner, edge, IDL, whatever. Name that position, name that player that you think is getting overlooked right now, and I respond to every comment. So let's have a fun discussion of overlooked prospects down below in the comments section. But hopefully you all enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new. And of course, if you're looking for a new sportsbook partner, be sure to check out my affiliate links down below in the description. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.